Good morning. It is March 24th, 2023, and this is the OSU Turfgrass Team Times. Online today, we've got Dr. David Gardner, Dr. Tyler Carr, Pamela Sherratt, and Dr. Dave Shetlar, and we are going to talk to you all things grass. That is the grass we don't smoke, of course. First up this morning is the inimitable Pamela Sherratt. Pam, take it away.
Good morning, everybody. So, yes, my first Turf Team Times of the season, and I was on social media yesterday, including TikTok, by the way, and I saw that, you know, 'tis the season, people are out there doing renovations, especially for drainage, to improve drainage on fields, and wanted to talk a little bit about sand slits. We call them sand slits in England. I've heard them referred to as sandbanding here. And the reason for installing these slits of sand on a native soil field is to try and remove quite large amounts of water off the surface quickly, especially if you have a clay loam or a heavy soil. And so ideally on a native soil field, we want to be at least 1 inch per hour infiltration. It's not uncommon in Ohio. I've actually seen infiltration rates of 0.0001. So we can have pretty low infiltration rates in Ohio. So we put these sand slits in, they're installed with equipment. Usually the sand is a medium coarse uniform sand. The slits are installed several inches apart, several inches deep. They run perpendicular to the slope of the field. The key with these though is that they need to be kept open. If you have a native soil, it's very easy for those slits to cap off. This is what they would look like. I have a little video here to show you. I went and watched them being installed at the softball field here at OSU several years ago. This is the piece of equipment that was putting them in. And you can see that those bands look quite wide, but actually, I have another video here. When you rub that sand away, the slits are only about a finger width, so they're quite narrow trenches. And what will happen on a native soil field very quickly, especially if you have a game during inclement weather, is that they will seal off. And so it's really important to have a top dressing program with something like this. So let me just take that away. So it's really important to have a top dressing program. So actually I was speaking with Britt Barry at our Grounds and Greens conference, because he's having these installed down there at Warren County. They're getting ready to put those in this month. And so Tyler and I are going to go down and do a little field day visit or something. We're going to go down there and watch that happen and visit with Britt a little bit. But the exciting news is that Britt's also going to be talking about this at the Ohio Sports Field Managers Council's field day on June 27th. And I didn't say that wrong. The Ohio Sports Turf Managers Association has a new name now. It's the Ohio Sports Field Management Council. It's the same organization. They have a great field day here at OSU Athletics, June 27th. And Britt will be talking about improving drainage, and they'll be showing the sand slits that have happened on his field. So he's intending on having a really aggressive, regular annual top dressing program with the same material to keep those channels open, and hoping for some good success. So I think that's something I wanted to mention. And then I'm going to do a little bit of a Ted Lasso for a moment, guys. But I saw a quote this week, and I really enjoyed it. And it's made me think a lot, because we're all trying to get young people in this industry, right? Superintendents, field managers, academics, you know, we're all trying to sell the industry. So I just love this quote, and I think it's food for thought for people. People don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it. So food for thought, there's my Ted Lasso moment, and I will hand off to the next person.
Actually, Pam, would core aerification with sand top dressing help or interfere with those slits?
They would help. So I know we have a lot of rain in England. Actually, we have the same amount of rain in Liverpool that we have in Columbus, Ohio, about 40 something inches a year. The difference is that in England, it seems like it's constant. You know, the weather system comes across the Atlantic, picks up all that water and dumps it on island in Liverpool. And so the number one thing for sports field managers in that region is drainage. So sand slits, core aerification, verti-draining, heavy top dressing programs, good grading. I mean, that's what they concentrate on. And we know from Dr. Aaron Wilson that that's what we've got to expect in Columbus is going to be inclement weather, lots of rain, especially in the spring and the fall. And so I think we'll start to see a little bit more of this technology across the board. But yeah, absolutely anything. You're never going to be, unless you're doing this in mid-July, you're not going to be causing any problems.
So Pam, I think it's also cool to talk about, you know, this isn't going to be an end all be all unless you have good surface drainage already to an extent. If you have areas that are pooling water, you may need to address those first before putting
that's a great point. In. Yeah, that's a great point, Tyler. Actually, ideally it needs to tie in with underlying drainage too. So the sand slit would tie in with the internal drainage, but also the surface drainage is key. And there's been research done that shows if you have undulations, those slits will cap off almost immediately.
So Pam's food for thought comment went straight out the door because they're all back interested in sand slits. But Pam, I won't forget. It's why we're doing the important part. All right. If anyone's got any more philosophical to talk about, it's going to be Dr. Dave Shetlar. Dave, what kind of bug problems we got?
Well, we've already seen some crane flies larvae showing up, even here at our turfgrass facility. They did a core aerification and sand top dressing, and for the next couple of days, quite a few crane flies popped up, or crane fly larvae, what some people call leather jackets. The ones that we picked up were native ones, and so they're helping mediate the thatch. However, we do have the European crane flies in the northern third of the state. And so if you're seeing what looks like cutworm pock marks or something like that, following an aerification event, it may be those larvae, because the European species do feed on the green grass blades, and their damage when they're sparse can look a lot like cutworm damage. So when a superintendent calls me and says that, you know, bug doc, I'm seeing cutworms out here, and I'm looking at the calendar and say, well, it's March and April. It's way too early for the cutworms to be doing anything. You probably have crane fly larvae. Another one that we're seeing with these heavy rains that are coming across, some of the caterpillars that have overwintered are popping up. There's a fairly large cutworm size one that has what I call chevron marks. They're a series of dark marks across the back of it. And this is called the winter moth. It's a fairly new invasive insect. It actually has been in the U.S. now for about 20 years, but it is now occasionally showing up in our turfgrass. It's one of these weird ones that the adults actually lay their eggs in August and September. The larvae undergo about 3/4 of their development by the first freeze event. So their overwintering is fairly mature larvae, and they can become active here in the very early spring. They'll then go dormant in May, pupate in July, and emerge again in August and September. So it's kind of a weird one. Haven't seen any real damage from it, but it's a kind of a curiosity that people are finding. The other one, the last one I want to talk about is we are getting very close to the annual bluegrass weevil migration time. I know in the northern third of the state, they've been covered with snow for a lot of the period of time, while down here we've had some fairly warm weather. And as a matter of fact, we're going to have a weevil track event in April for the Central Ohio golf course superintendents to go take a look at what these things look like and soap flush them. Ben McGraw from Penn State's going to be there. He's going to be the primary speaker, and I'm going to be there just to help stir the pot and confuse people. And hopefully we'll flush out some weevils and let everybody see what those look like. That's all I've got, Ed.
Dr. Shetlar, I'll have you know it's balmy tropical, and we're wearing grass skirts, drinking pina coladas in the northern part of the state, sir. It's beautiful up here.
Okay.
Dr. Gardner, give me some depression on weed.
All right. Good morning, everybody. I don't think I shared my screen, did I? Here, try that again. Okay, second attempt. So you might not be seeing germinating crabgrass just yet in your location. This is crabgrass at, like 2-leaf stage or whatever. We would typically see this, like the latter part of April or even the first 1, 2, 3 weeks of May, right? You might see something that looks like this, which is not weed germinating, the way that the leaves poke out of the ground. It's sometimes people look at that and they're like, oh, geez, that's crabgrass germinating, but it's not. It's not weed in the leaves. Sometimes when they're emerging, they happen to look somewhat similar and it confuses people. But I mention this because if you see knotweed, its germination usually predates crabgrass by about 3 weeks, maybe 2, depending on where you are. Remember, there's a lot of different ways that we can figure out the optimal timing for our pre-emergence herbicides. One of them is to look at this shrub, and when it's in bloom, these are forsythia. That's when we say to go out and make your application. That's typically between April 1 and April 15, but since we've had a warmer winter, everything's a little bit ahead of where it should be. And so there are forsythias that are in bloom, which is kind of your indicator that it's time to go out and put your pre-emerge down. On a related note, now there's a lot of things going on here. This is the website GDD tracker at Michigan State. And so when I say there's a lot of things going on, note up at the top where there's this open tab that says how to print screen. Like I had to look up how it is that you copy and paste this image into a PowerPoint presentation. But what I wanted to do was point out that this website, which uses growing degree days as a predictor for when it is that you should be putting out your pre-emergence herbicide, that is saying that it is time for crabgrass to be out. Now, I've accidentally got the proxy primo timer, but the crabgrass pre also said it's time to be putting out your crabgrass pre-emerge. Really, any time between now and April 15th, you'll be good to go. As far as the pre-emergence herbicides that we use, it's typically prodiamine and dithiopyr in commercial landscape usages or on golf courses. There are a couple of other options like benzoylide on golf courses. Oxadiazone is labeled for crabgrass pre-emergence, but is more often used for goosegrass. And actually there's some environmental issues with that one, and it's kind of on the EPA's hot list right now. It's become a restricted use pesticide. If you have a goosegrass problem, you should look into using granular formulations of oxadiazone, but for crabgrass, typically we'll rely on prodiamine or dithiopyr. The winter annuals are beginning to bloom depending on where you are. So things like henbit and chickweed and hairy bittercress, et cetera. To control those post-emergence now, basically let price be your guide. The more expensive your herbicide is, and if it's a 4-way product, it's more likely to give you good control. My point is that when those weeds have hardened off due to wintertime stress and they're growing now and starting to flower, they can be really difficult to control. So you should at least map those areas out and then consider using a pre-emergence herbicide in September. I've done that. It actually works really well in tamping down those winter annuals. You can also consider using a post-emergence herbicide in late fall to try to control winter annuals. Like I said, this time of the year, it can be a little bit more difficult to get that done. As far as these here, so like wild onion, wild garlic, I'm still getting a couple of calls about these. So these are monocots that are not grasses. And so the herbicide recommendations are a little bit different. In turfgrass, we say either 2,4-D or sulfentrazone. So maybe even a combination product that contains both of those active ingredients. If you're seeing those in ornamental beds, 2,4-D is not registered, so you could only use sulfentrazone, and you have to be careful with that. It has to be as a directed spray because the sulfentrazone can't come into contact with the ornamentals. Ed, that's what I have.
Thank you, Dr. Gardner. Your insights are much appreciated. Dr. Tyler Carr, follow that.
All right, how's it going, everybody? So we have 1 week left in March, and temperatures have been pretty unseasonably warm this year. I know a lot of you have been itching to do something outside, do something to your turf. One of those things is fertilizing. And on lawns right now, I'd be pretty hesitant to apply too much nitrogen until probably mid-April to mid-May, depending on what part of the state you're in. If you decide you want to put some fertilizer out right now, slow release forms at low rates, we're talking, less than a 1/4 pound of N per 1,000 square feet, using a coated urea or one of the synthetic slow releases like urea formaldehyde or methylene urea. But if you're on a sand-based system or an athletic field with traffic, maybe a high school soccer field or baseball field, you could get away with some spoon feeding of low end to stimulate some recovery. Another thing I want to add is that if you have a soil test report that has a pH of less than 6, now is a pretty good time to apply lime. I wouldn't just be putting lime out for the sake of putting lime out unless you have a soil test with pH less than 6. And dolomitic lime is a common source for that. And we have an updated fact sheet on liming in the home lawn if you want to look up some more information on that. Another thing that we could be thinking about right now is overseeding. So complete establishment on cool season lawns or grasses in general is not really recommended this time of year, but it's a good time to put some seed out on existing areas. Big thing is good seed to soil contact, and that's more difficult in established systems. So maybe coming in and doing some kind of solid tine aerification prior to overseeding can help get some good seed to soil contact. In terms of some updates, we've had some really good feedback on the OTF conference education survey. I think we've had 160 respondents. That survey ends at the end of next week. And so if you haven't filled out that survey, please do so. It's been really beneficial for us. We're also having listening sessions in person and over Zoom on April 7th. That email has been sent out through OTF last week, and you should be expecting some more emails coming out soon. And then we're also working to schedule virtual listening sessions for assistant superintendents and equipment managers sometime the week of April 10th. So be on the lookout for an email with that information as well. So with that,
Dr. Carr, there we go. All right.
Hey, if you don't mind, I would interject. I agree. It's a great time of the year to overseed. It's just every year I get an email from somebody that says, hey, I need to overseed. And I put down like prodiamine. How long do I have to wait until I can overseed? And the answer is 4 months. Now, the good news is it puts you back to when it is that you should be establishing from seed. But remember that those two things, generally speaking, do not go together, right?
yes.
And for those people who are going, why would he say that? Remember, the prodiamine is a pre-emergent herbicide that's designed to stop any germination. And so that would be a bad idea. All right. We did get an email.
Can I ask Dave a question? Can you talk about sod in that respect as well, Dave? If people are thinking about putting some sod out?
Well, if you're putting out the sod, then probably you would still want to skip the pre-emergence application for a couple of reasons. One, the sod itself is going to bury the seed enough that it's probably going to sharply decrease the amount of germination. But the other thing is that those herbicides act by pruning roots, which is deadly to a seedling, but it's also not great to grass that you're trying to get the root system to grow again. So it's something that I would avoid in sodded situations too.
Oh, the debate finished. Are we good? Can we carry on? Okay. Last one is myself, and I just want to talk about an email that we had come in this week. Hopefully my screen is not completely jacked up now by doing what I just did.
Looks good.
All right. But we had a homeowner reach out, and her question was looking for answers to why her turf from a distance looked brown, but then when she got up close and personal to it, she realized that it was actually purple. And so at this time of year in particular, and in the fall, and this is applicable to home lawn, sports fields, and golf courses, some of our grass species will display a response to what we might call highlight and cold temperature. And so it would be a highlight response, and it's somewhat of a stress type response from the plant, where these red pigments, which we also see in things like strawberries, cherries, red cabbage, they will appear as somewhat of a protective mechanism for the light, because the plant is just not photosynthesizing optimally in these temperatures. So what should happen is, as temperatures warm up, these colors naturally dissipate and disappear. This is not a phosphorus deficiency, right? That would be one concern that I would have. This is more of a response to the cooler temperatures that we would see overnight and the higher light intensity. So it's one of these where we may need a little bit of patience, but once it warms up, it disappears. The only potential problem would be, Dr. Petrell indicated, and his research did show that some of the rough bluegrass cultivars do have a greater propensity to show this response. And if I was seeing my whole lawn have that type of color, I might be concerned for later in the year, because once temperatures start to warm up, then rough bluegrass becomes a problem, right? So that would be the only concern I'd really have about it. All right, without further ado, I will stop sharing, and if there are questions, feel free to reach out. Dr. Carr forgot to put the contact slide up. We'll remember that for the next one.
We could put it in the show notes.
There we go. We will be back in 2 weeks' time. Things are starting to warm up, starting to grow. So I'm sure the problems will start to mount. With that, I'd say thank you, and we will talk to you all soon. Thank you, folks.